Hello and welcome to episode 1 of 100 Years of Horror. In this series, I will be taking a look at a horror movie from each of the last 10 decades and reviewing it, as well as giving a short history behind it. We will be starting in the 1910s, in the midst of the golden era of silent cinema, with the short film Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from 1912, starring the actor James Cruise, who later found success as a director, his biggest hit being the 1923 movie The Covered Wagon. Cruise plays both titular characters, the mild-mannered scientist Henry Jekyll and his murderous alter ego Edward Hyde, though the film uses only the characters' surnames. It is based on the novella The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, written by Robert Louis Stevenson and published in 1886, in which Gabriel John Utterson, a lawyer, notices some strange events occurring around his friend Dr. Henry Jekyll, believing that he is being blackmailed by the sinister Edward Hyde, a known miscreant and troublemaker. What he doesn't realise is that his friend and Hyde are one and the same, Hyde having been created via the use of a potion that Jekyll synthesized in order to expunge himself of his hidden evil urges. Rather than remove the urges, the potion creates an entirely new personality which begins acting upon them. It even somehow alters his physical appearance, making him a smaller and younger man. A serum created by Jekyll acts as an antidote and allows him to return to his original form. As Hyde's body count increases, he relies upon the potion less and less, eventually being able to transform without it. And with Jekyll being unable to produce more serum and the police and Utterson closing in on Hyde, Jekyll kills himself as he realizes that that is the only way to stop the monster from taking over completely. The 2012 adaptation is actually the second film adaptation of the novella, with an earlier version being produced in 1908, though no copies of that version remain. With a runtime of just over 11 minutes, the 1912 adaptation loses a lot of the nuance of the book, but makes up for it with a strong central performance by Cruise, along with some excellent makeup effects that make him unrecognisable when playing the role of Hyde. Plot-wise, the same general beats are there, though this time we see the events from the perspective of Jekyll and Hyde, with no appearance from Utterson. The film opens with Jekyll and a friend reading a book about how certain chemicals can separate someone into two beings, one being good and the other evil. In secret, Jekyll experiments with the idea and creates his potion. After a short moment of hesitation, he downs the potion, after which the transformation takes place into the evil Hyde. Now walking with a hunch and sporting a sinister grin complete with fangs and a change in hair colour, he stalks around the room for a few moments before drinking the antidote which changes him back into Jekyll. As I mentioned earlier, Cruise's performance is the main draw of the film, and he pulls off both of these roles well, despite Hyde's appearance being rather unsubtle and somewhat cartoonish. Sometime later, Jekyll becomes the suitor to the daughter of a minister, but we also learn that, just like in the book, his repeated use of the potion has made Hyde able to take control at will. We see him transform again and spend a few moments wreaking havoc in Jekyll's home before venturing onto the streets. Strangely, his outing seems to consist entirely of him pushing over a little girl and then running back to transform into Jekyll once again. His character is portrayed as just mischievous at this point, and it's unknown whether he has a vendetta against that specific child. He's probably done it so often that she's used to it at this point. The next time he transforms, he is in the park with the minister's daughter, who is now his wife. He can feel the transformation coming on again, and he runs away from her, where he once again turns into Hyde without the use of the potion. Hyde attacks Jekyll's wife, but the attack is stopped by her father, who Hyde subsequently murders before running away again, this time chased by a policeman back to his house. He is able to drink his antidote before the policeman arrives, however, and not being able to find Hyde, the policeman leaves. This incident makes Jekyll finally decide that he needs to leave and take himself far away from his wife, who he bids goodbye to as he feels the transformation coming on again. He runs home and, finding himself out of antidote, he turns back into Hyde and locks himself in his office. His butler hears Hyde in the office and calls the policeman from earlier. Before the policeman can break down the door, Hyde, in an apparent moment of clarity, picks up a bottle of poison and drinks it. The door is then broken down with an axe as Hyde lies dead on the floor and the film ends. Perhaps it's a cliche nowadays, but I was surprised that the corpse of Hyde didn't turn back into Jekyll at the end, showing everyone present that they were one and the same. I guess back in 1912 they had a little more restraint and didn't need to spell everything out. As an adaptation of the book, this film leaves a lot to be desired as many events have changed and important characters have been removed entirely. But as a standalone film, it's an effective, albeit short, little horror story. Even without dialogue, the plot is easy to follow and the ending is suitably tense. And while the effects may look laughable to a modern audience, they were good for the time and served their purpose in the story. Later versions of Jekyll and Hyde would bring more nuance back into the character, with a particular favourite of mine being the 2007 television adaptation starring James Nesbitt, simply titled Jekyll. Overall, the film is an enjoyable watch, but there are better places to go if you want to see something more faithful. As with all movies made before 1924, this version is now in the public domain and you can freely view it online. I'll put a link in the description to the version I watched for this review. Thank you for checking out this episode of 100 Years of Horror. Please join me next time as we take a look at a movie from the 1920s. Goodbye for now.